So it looks like there are satellite phones with touchscreens and support like map data and stuff in the same ballpark as like Verizon phones or whatever AT&T or T-Mobile. I mean, in terms of being competitive in terms of price with like a really high-end Apple phone or a high-end Samsung phone or OnePlus or whatever. And there aren't nearly as many like Iridium network users congesting the network. Unfortunately, you have to be outside. You can't use them in like indoors or in a moving vehicle. But that's not really a bad thing, I don't think.
Well, I guess
But you could use the GPS functionality of maps in a moving vehicle. GPS is its own thing.
where I'm I guess if you're on a boat, maybe the satellite phone is better, but I don't know if there's any place where that actually works better anymore for a civilian.
Like the absolute middle of nowhere.
Well, in that the coverage used to be bad, like even as recent as 20 years ago, to the point where it made a lot of sense to get a satellite phone if you're like traveling a lot. Um, but even now, they make it so that it's super easy to switch SIM cards if you're going between like America and Europe. I mean, you have to get the phone that's capable, but as long as it's capable, it's like
Oh yeah,
fairly easy.
and so many phones these days are like dual SIM or eSIM, so you just
Hmm.
all you have to
Oh
do
yeah,
is
Eastern too, for that
code
matter.
the whatever IMEI number or something like that. That's all done over the air. That stuff's actually quite impressive. Now, the reason I was looking at this stuff is because every so often I start to wonder, like, what are the options? Like, is Iridium even still a thing? And yeah, it's still a thing. And but when you look at the devices, they look like candy bar phones. I'm serious. They look like phones from the early 2000s. They don't have most of them have really tiny screens. There's only a few examples that have screens that it can support a map, like a real map, and that run a like and like a really old version of Android too. Maybe not even Android. It might be just like a specialized Linux for a phone. But anyways, like, the reason I'm curious about these things is because somehow these like practically zero frills devices have managed to stay somewhat relevant or viable despite the I'm not even sure how to describe how quickly mobile devices happened, and then how quickly the what appeared to be some kind of push towards creatively engaging people with like a full blown computer to swiping all day long. Obviously, it's a better consumer conduit than like a keyboard and a mouse, which is really built for productivity. Part of me wonders how much longer this like insane consumer cycle even continues. Like the media cycle itself is accelerated to the point that it's just gibberish half the time.
Well, I think part of what you're talking alluding to is the cycles were originally reacting to somewhat organic needs that arose like at scale. But now in if the top down is trying to dictate the fads, but then also there's no casual consumerism, it doesn't really work. And I think that's what they've been struggling with is like, I think capitalism peaked in the 90s. And then when executives try, for whatever reason, executives were told that they can like dictate trends. And then they tried to start dictating trends from the top down, and it just never works. Like it, I think they got lucky a couple times, and it wasn't the actual top down trend deciding that worked. It was like, oh, people just happen to really love Mike Myers. So like the fact that somebody decided to make a bunch of Austin Powers sequels had more to do with some executive thinking that they're making a trend rather than Mike Myers being that popular. Main reason being once they like got to the end of like the cycle, it didn't do well, and they had like exhausted the audience of that trend down to anytime somebody left SNL to go start making movies after between Chevy Chase and I want to say mm, I want to say Mike Myers, but then you got to look at Pete Davidson actually like succeeding in Transformers. So there's been a few successes since Mike Myers. Um,
Will
but
Ferrell.
for sure, but I mean for a while it was like everybody who left at their peak was able to just convert it into a career. And I want to say whenever Chris Farley died, after Belushi had died, I think that's when people started to kind of get wary of that cycle. But then other people showed that the drugs weren't really part of the SNL thing. So like at Keenan Thompson, for example, just not leaving, I think threw people off. Um, because it's like they want to make it seem like he wasn't successful, but it was clearly successful for
Wait, that dude started on like Nick Jr.
right, exactly.
He's had an extremely long career. Like
Of
he's
course.
got a fan base that started as children. Like I think that needs to be made very clear here. This dude is like he's part of it all now.
He's he's the definition of successful on any metric. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's mostly because there was this trajectory of like, oh, you do SNL, you leave and go do movies, and
Well,
then you fizzle out.
yeah, well,
Um,
he hasn't left to go do movies and fizzled out. He did movies when he was
right.
when he was young.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, I don't think everybody has the same trajectory, but
Yeah.
because there was like so many people from SNL that were able to convert to movie careers, I think people just assume that if you were able to make it on SNL and SNL was funny, then you're going to eventually break out. Um, even down to a lot of the, like Amy Poehler, um, I guess Tina Fey, uh, Sudeikis. there's a lot of people who are now in television or film or some sort of writing capacity that broke out in SNL, and they've done so much since then that we don't even really like associate them with SNL anymore. Um, so I think on the one hand, it's great as an institution to be there to foster talent, but so much of the narrative about the talent coming out of there has unfortunately been in the shadow of Chevy Chase, like whether people like it or not. Um, then I think that's the problem became that he did not age gracefully in his career. Where I mean, okay, let me phrase that. He in working with other people, he did not age gracefully, but apparently he's a sweetheart to his fans, which is, sounds like a narcissist kind of. Anyway, but I I don't know if comedians who get rich end up becoming narcissists just by default because it's basically like in their mind they've convinced people to just talk and get rich. And I think that makes them feel like demigods at the least, if not just gods at the, just straight up gods. So I think this same thing that happened with Chevy Chase happened with Joe Rogan, but for different reasons. And I only say that just I had watched Joel McHale talk about working with Chevy Chase and then Dan Harmon, and then other people talk about working with Dan Harmon, and then you got to check on your sources because it seems like Dan Harmon is toxic as well, but for different reasons. Not like he's like inwardly toxic, not outwardly toxic. If that makes sense. Not to say that it doesn't all have effect on other people around them. I think it's just the way it sounds like they're all describing their experiences with each other. It was like some people turn things outward and some people turn things inward. And I think it's hard to tell which one it is if you're like not in close proximity. Because for a while it seemed like Dan Harmon was the asshole. He's an asshole, but he was not the asshole in this situation as far as what happened with Community, it sounds like.
Hmm. But then nobody else could write that story. And it
I
felt like
mean, yeah, for sure, but
Community's weird. I
it
can't.
is weird. I think that's
I
why.
tried to watch it again not too long ago, and I couldn't watch it for whatever reason. I think I have to be enrolled in a class to watch that show.
It definitely works better during spring. Um, it's like one of those things that works better with the school year for sure. But
That's
I
so
think the
messed up.
issue is the story is unnaturally long in that if it's supposed to be about college,
Yeah, it takes too
the
long.
notion of 6 seasons was never that doesn't make any fucking sense because undergrad is 4, so that's like
Even for people to take a slightly longer path, it usually
right.
completes in
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, at
So
the
six six seasons in a movie.
but I mean, I think that
That's just a trope, though. That was Abed's trope.
I think one of the issues that they had was that they weren't able to convince the audience that it was not about the study group and it was about community college. Like the audience only ever saw it as about the study group. And that's when people dropping out made it impossible for the show to carry on in the same vein, even though it tried, but
No, that's
that's why
even though
it
that's
felt
more
like a fail.
realistic. That
Right, exactly.
people come and go. They sometimes they come back, but usually they don't. That's the nature of that kind of environment.
And I think that's where Lost did a better job of. I mean,
Lost was a better example of a school environment. No, I'm
well,
sorry.
in that no, in that they killed off people a lot,
Oh yeah.
and so it's one of those things where,
Well, that wasn't that the question. It's like, man, I wonder who's gonna die this time.
well, and that's when they were able to, when they start killing people off, then they introduce new people. So it's a matter of the way that you balance how many people the audience is attached to at any given moment. You can't let it bloat, but you also can't let it stagnate. And I think that's where The Office is one where they stayed in a really good pocket of everybody being who they are, and then they started to evolve naturally, but it was like, I think at the proper time for the series, but the audience still wasn't ready for it, so some of the people rejected it. And so I think that's where animation is much easier to keep the audience in the proper alignment with the characters, because then people growing naturally, like chronologically in real life, doesn't have to impact how the characters grow. So I think this is where The Simpsons is like probably the best example of keeping the characters in line with culture, and then they only progress as the culture is ready for them to progress. Like, I haven't watched it in a long time, but I'm assuming Maggie's still a baby. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
last time I saw it, it was she was still a baby. Bart has is the forever, whatever 12-year-old. Lisa's always going to be 8. Homer still has 3 hairs.
I think it's been 12 plus years since I've even remotely seen an episode. Same shit
God,
with South Park.
how many fucking seasons are there?
They got to be in the 40s. So
36. No,
36.
35, and they've renewed season 36
Okay.
as of December 29. They're in their 36th season. There'll be
Oh, okay.
781
Yeah.
episodes.
I forgot about Tracy Ullman's show, so I was
Yeah.
alive when it started. So they can't be older than me.
It would
Unlike,
take 10 or 11 more seasons to reach this milestone of 1,000. But that was a while ago. That was in 24. Of course they're going to reach 1,000 episodes. The Simpsons is like the longest running cartoon in history or some crap.
I mean, and yeah, I don't understand how the people involved keep doing it. It must feel like golden handcuffs, the most explicit form of golden handcuffs. But I don't even know if if it
Oh
even pays them
man,
that much.
I bet they've got like a machine that just spits out episodes. I'm serious. I bet they've got one of the most well trained AIs that can just spit out entire like coherent episodes of The Simpsons, and the voice actors have their voices have been sampled so extensively that and individual AIs have been trained on individual characters to the point that they can just give us Simpsons episodes. Like with 781 episodes, that's a lot of information, really highly focused information. They've made movies,
So
like when a real world character, a real world celebrity reaches a certain point, like in with status, they become a Simpsons caricature, and then they forever exist as that caricature. Then almost reflect, almost as if the reflection like moves back into the real world. That caricature is who we know that person for from then on. Nobody's gonna remember what Gerald Ford was actually like, but they definitely know what he's like on The Simpsons, which is basically like a Homer in a suit and a little bit older, which itself is fucked up. We're all gonna remember Tricky Dick because of Futurama though, which is acceptable.
well, and I'm looking up. I don't really trust the reported net worths from Google, but
How much is Matt Groening
it's
worth?
well, the voice actors is what I was looking at in terms of I was thinking that they were going to get super exploited and maybe be worth a couple million after all of this, but it seems like they may have gotten paid upwards of 80 to 85 million so far. So that if Fox was actually paying them well, but even then, I know what they would deserve based on how long they've been doing it. So obviously there has to be somewhat of a passion for doing it that they've been able to do it that long. But that's where I want. Maybe it's the best balance of those two things that exists, which is why it's been able to go this long. So
Yeah, and these people are probably these voice actors are most likely going to be able to do this until they just can't read, like can't sit in their home office and read information off of a screen.
well,
I don't think there's anything stopping that kind of production for an animation at this point. Like the quality, the availability of quality technology and equipment to do that kind of thing is it's just so available. Voice acting is a very unique place, though. It's because there are some areas where it has to be pristine and essentially an extension of like conservatory grade recording, or in other areas it doesn't even matter. Like in a lot of cases, like the standards for quality for like broadcast are a lot more flexible than they are for like recorded content. But still, like anyone who's established in that industry should have the resources to go out and get a decent microphone and an audio interface and hire an audio engineer to go in and help set up a room or a space to so that it's like the best place to do it. None of that stuff is difficult, and then almost all of any kind of environmental stuff can generally be cleaned up.
well, it got to a point where the digital mics did so much of the heavy lifting that as long as you didn't peek out the recording, you can get a pretty clean recording just being a regular ass person. You don't have to be an audio engineer and
That's what I
know.
mean. But as a professional, one would they would be able to have they would have contacts.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. In that, I think there was so much during COVID where um the audio post replacement was used, and everybody was getting their blue
Yeah, they're
Yeti
Yetis and
or whatever. Like, I don't know if people were getting
oh no, now
super expensive mics or anything, but
well now
they were.
there's a whole range of USB equipped microphones designed just for this kind of thing. That from the heavy hitters like Shure has their own model of USB mic, and Audio Technica does, and Bear has their own, and they all do, and it's because you know got to be competitive. Can't let Yeti eat everyone's lunch. Or the
Well, and one of the issues was audio engineers were trying to make it seem as if nobody was ever going to be able to figure out what they do, and then they they made their practices very opaque to everybody else, and then once the mics did most of the heavy lifting, everybody's like, fuck the 10%. It sounds good enough. Unless it's going in a video game for PlayStation or some shit, things that go on the internet for the most part, um, this is where all the podcasts are mostly self-produced, and then they don't really lose any viewers for being self-produced. And I think that's where.
I don't think the expectations are as high. I don't think
I mean,
anyone. I don't think there are any that people expect somebody doing these things on their own to have like the sound of like one of NPR's flagship studios or something like that. One of those multi-million-dollar facilities.
well, the issue is the the ear can't tell if one studio is $5 million and somebody's using a podcast mic. The ear can't tell that
Yeah.
much difference. It
No.
can tell there's a difference. It can't tell that much difference. And I think ultimately this is what a lot of studios have figured out. And so,
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of differences. Like when you're recording and stacking layers of things, noise eventually builds up. But when we're talking about like a live environment where disparate channels are coming together simultaneously and going out, and it's not like the kind of thing that's gonna suffer, multiple generations of noise. It's the standards are different, different medium, different. I mean, the playback system might be the same, but that's the only thing that those two kind of worlds have in common. Really, the tools are similar. They're almost identical and they're used in very similar ways. But it's strange. Like I would never use. I might use the microphone from this podcast setup that I've got here to record a guitar, maybe. But I don't use this thing to record anything like that. Like the whole podcast rig is completely independent of the hardware I use to record the guitar.
I mean, and at that, it's like, why would you do that when you could just plug the guitar straight into the computer?
I mean, that's what I do. I have a
I
interface
mean,
that's
it
designed
just,
for it.
I, I mean, not you, but one,
Yeah.
unless it was meant to be about the acoustic sound. But even then,
Yeah, who
like,
who has that room that sounds that good that they actually want to record
right.
it?
Yeah.
You gotta build a room if you want it to sound good. You can't just pick a room and say we're gonna make this room sound good. That generally doesn't work. You can get lucky and a room might sound good right out the gate, but start putting things in it and then it starts sounding weird. It sucks. It's like the best sounding rooms I've ever been in have been like purpose built concert halls where like surfaces of the walls are designed for a certain thing. But that's like, you know, hundreds of years of combined experience and know-how in acoustics to acoustic architectural acoustics to get a space to emerge and sound good right out the gate. With minimal fine tuning, of course, but like to know what kind of surfaces to employ in certain locations or points in the room, that stuff's crazy to me. That's super high level. So I remember reading. I think my dad showed me an article about there's like a hall in New York. It's like it's all lined with marble, but it's the kind of thing where you can hear a pin drop on the stage, and like all of the treatment is just built into the walls and into the ceiling, and you'd look at it and you think it'd be like, wow, this looks like a giant restroom, kind of like in the image, but apparently it sounds incredible. Like that stuff's amazing. Or like a natural amphitheater where when a person's at the stage, they can just talk and you can hear them at the far end of the seating area. That stuff's always amazing to me. But that's getting really lucky. You can't just like walk into an apartment and say, "Yep, this room's gonna sound good tomorrow."
Not, you know, not without treatment, but
Yeah.
even the lowest level programs have assisted noise cancellation or
Oh yeah.
some sort of algorithm that just completely suppresses all the noise.
What was
And
it
they've
like?
gotten so good.
Nvidia had some like GPU based noise reduction. I remember they
Yeah.
released it like a couple, like I mean maybe it was during COVID.
Hmm.
Um, that stuff was crazy. It would take out like power tools in the background. Like
So on that note, Nvidia has rolled back a lot of the shit that they released during COVID. It's
really,
fucking crazy. So I don't know if you use Nvidia or AMD or what if your computer.
I mean I have a computer with an Nvidia card, but my daily driver is actually Intel integrated GPU.
So
I try to
that's
run on the
crazy.
leanest,
Yeah.
lightest computer I possibly can for things like puttering around on the internet because I don't feel like it's necessary to dedicate a bunch of computing power to looking at a browser. Also, I'm still very wary that Facebook is going to run my GPU at full throttle, and I don't want them to have that kind of access. So I let them run off of integrated GPU, and most things are fine.
So Nvidia went through these phases and it started with crypto. And what they started doing is lowering the wattage of the GPUs and basically throttling them the same way fast cars in America get governors put on them. So you can't,
Mm,
it's like artificially not letting you hit the upper limit. Because the argument was people were buying these GPUs and using them for cryptocurrency and it was a waste of energy. And so
yeah.
Nvidia's response was, "Oh, we're going to make these light hash rate." I That was a red flag to me. So I was at first I'm like anytime there's something that they're taking some of their power back, it was a red flag. And so that was the first red flag. Then they did the AI, basically deployed it, and you had to turn it off. And if you didn't turn it off, it was keeping a cache of like all of your everything you did. So it was eating up your memory and then made it seem like your shit was slowing down.
Huh.
And so that was like red flag number two. And so recently they've been pushing updates basically once a week. And every time they push an update, the shit stops working. And so they actively are trying to make it so people have to keep buying the new generation. And so they had GeForce Now, which allowed you to get online and like broadcast using that. They took it and turned it into the NVIDIA app, took away broadcasting completely, and then
Huh.
made it so that now it automatically you can do third party overclocking, but now they took it so that their software doesn't really allow you to modify it uh, in the same way that it used to. And so it's like I've watched the same hardware fluctuate between how well it runs based on the recent driver update. And it's like once now that they're pushing them once a week, every time they push an update, I'm wary of doing it. But there's such a significant loss of processing power that I have to do it. So it I see what they've done to their hardware. It's the same shit Apple did, but they must be hitting some wall of needing to turn over their hardware because people aren't using it for crypto anymore.
Huh.
And so that's where whenever they were buying it for crypto or whenever crypto people were buying it, they weren't fucking with the gaming hardware at all. So shit was like always working perfectly. But now it's like I'll be playing Spider-Man and Spider-Man's head will just fucking disappear because the GPU is like freaking out. And the movie will keep going. So then you got I put it up on YouTube. It's like it it's glitching out. A combination of Sony putting out unfinished software in their port. Like they did a poor port of their game, and you can tell. It's like I mean I don't blame them for porting it, but they didn't have to port it as poorly as they did. So it capitalism is on its like dying leg, and shit is actively being made to seem as if it's breaking down to force people to buy new shit, but people don't have the capacity to run out and buy new shit. So even if I wanted to buy a brand new 5070 or 5080 or whatever, I couldn't just drop everything and go do that because the economy is not in that type of situation. Whereas like 2017, 2018, when shit was booming and for crypto, you could everybody, I mean not everybody, but a lot of people had the capacity to just be like, "Oh, I'm going to buy an extra GPU and upgrade it now because I don't want to wait." And Nvidia got stuck thinking that that's how their consumer base was going to keep moving. And I don't
I still have yet. I mean, I've seen plenty of benchmarks. I've seen plenty of tables. Oh man, all the tables. But I've yet to see anything that leads me to the conclusion that anyone outside of like, unfortunately, outside of AI research, is actually taking advantage of like a 40 series card. Like seriously, I'm just not convinced. Maybe I'm not looking at the right content or something, but I'm clearly not playing the games that are that demanding. But I just don't. I'm just not seeing from from a content creation standpoint, even like why anyone would need more than like a 3060 card is insanely powerful. I've never had a GPU like that. Like, and if it's comparable to a 2070, I'm not sure why anyone would need more than that. Like a 2080 to me seems like an insanely powerful card still. It might be a power hog, but if that's really all it's about is reducing the power consumption, I think maybe we should start asking the question like is this kind of stuff even necessary?
Well, and
Like
the
AMD cards, like comparable, like gaming level, like same similar frame rate, color depth, capable cards cost less. Uh, They just don't have the same number of ray tracing, whatever the chiplet thing that Nvidia dominates. But even Intel has their own version of ray tracing that apparently is comparable somehow. But do we even need this stuff? I mean, like consumers.
no, I mean clearly not, because that's not how the market's moving. But I think one of the issues is the game engines have become so efficient that, yeah, if you got 8K textures, then it's gonna need as much power as
Well,
possible.
sure.
But everybody's not nobody's making anything 8K for gaming, let
Yeah,
alone
they're like the only
not a
eight
whole lot of 4K.
the only 8K games that I've read about are games that have been optimized for reinterpolation
Hmm.
into 8K. And there was a game that was originally being designed as an 8K game, but it was only ever released as a 1440p game that was designed to upscale to 4K. And so there's still maybe I'm also willing to admit, I'm not paying that much attention to the 8K sphere because I mean outside of an IMAX projection, I just don't think that there's a reason for that to even exist. Because nobody's actually watching their 104-inch screen like from 60 feet away. They're watching a 600-inch screen from 100 feet away.
I think we did hit max screen size, and I don't know. It's also potentially because we hit max house size.
Yeah. So
Um,
I sit in front of a 43-inch monitor typically, and that's about as much computer monitors I like. I had a 49-inch screen for a while, but it was just slightly too large for the distance that I typically sit at the desk, and I couldn't get the TV further away from me. Um, but you have a very large TV, what I would consider a large TV. Um, but you also have your couch further away, and so like at couch depth or distance, or even like edge of couch distance, it's still far enough away that it's not like too much. And so I think that there is like there is a relationship in depth to screen size that has to be observed. Otherwise, otherwise it's just it's overwhelming. But I think that at a certain point you got to be so far away from the thing for it to make sense. I used to love like going to the movies and sitting right up underneath the screen, but I can't do that anymore.
well, and on that note, at some point I had realized what you're saying as far as it doesn't make sense to have a big screen to watch people just talk to each other. Especially if you're like too close. Um, so it ends up being like, yeah, you have to watch this screen from far enough away, but also you can't just, because of the disproportionate sizes of the heads, it's like you can't watch somebody who has a 2 foot tall head
It's like having Modoc in the
for too
room.
long. Right. Yeah. It's like that that for too long, it's just overwhelming. And even for a short period, that head size is overwhelming. So close ups for like reality TV and shit like that, it just doesn't work if you're sitting close up on a big screen TV.
Yeah.
It's yeah, because it's then they look like giant people too.
Yeah.
Like yeah, like you're saying, it's Modoc, but then they're proportionally giant, so their body's fucking 8 feet tall or
Yeah,
whatever.
they go from Modoc to like what is it, Nimrod in like 2 seconds, 2 steps. Just whoa,
Yeah.
giant.
And then when everything was um HD, between when it was HD and 4K, and cameras didn't the cameras went digital, and they didn't know how to put the filter on the same way, then you could see everybody's fucking pimples and everybody's
Yeah.
makeup lines, and
Well, I think
it
that
was just terrible.
I think that's an issue of like the kind of lenses and the kind of shot
Mm-hmm.
depth that usually happens between like um, within like the cinematography industry. They generally try to have longer shots and they use longer lenses so they can get further away. And even like the big lenses that television crews use, they're not like right up on people. But once everyone was using a digital camera that had video capabilities, the lenses were always designed for photography, which generally requires the subject to be pretty much right up in front and close. And I think there was a big learning curve. I remember like House, that movie or that TV show House was like, I think officially the first TV series filmed or shot in HD with DSLRs, and they had a steep learning curve. There were like entire episodes where somebody clearly forgot to change the white balance, and so the whole episode would have this really weird, like not just warm but like kind of cooked look. And then there would be these other episodes where it just looked completely sterile. And I don't think it was for dramatic effect because it was very clearly to me owning, the exact same camera that they used. Like the white balance was just set wrong. They had it set to auto, and the whatever they pointed at was the wrong color, like not white at all, and just screwed it up. I refuse to believe that was a stylistic decision. That was clearly operator error. But it didn't matter because the story was good and the acting was good. But yeah, there was a lot that was a rough period, and I know what you mean about the pimples. I remember watching it was like a court TV thing, and the camera shifted to uh, the person that was on the stand, and I couldn't not look at their pores because you could. It was all I could see. I kept thinking like, man, just why are they focused that close? Why are they focused on that point? And then and then it occurs to me like, oh yeah, we're in a transition phase. Things are going to be really rough for a while. But then some of those cinematography techniques start bleeding down and are distilled into what can be done in a handheld camera that's not a giant system with a monster lens designed for that kind of thing, but a normal consumer grade camera. People figure it out, and I think that's why we have a lot of stuff nowadays that there are a lot of independent films that are actually able to be made that are really good because they're being made carefully, and the videographers are adhering to you know technical practices that have been proven. They just had to figure out how to do it in a slightly smaller camera with a different image sensor and different lenses, and figure out how to do lighting on a different scale. We also have like a million options in terms of video programming these days that are just I mean I like when when American television goes on its regular breaks because they can only seem to make 5 episodes a season now, and then they cut it in half and they finish the season 6 months later, which I think is just horse crap. But since that's the standard now, every time that happens, we get a new wave of like Korean programming or Japanese programming or Indian programming or Eastern European programming or Western European programming or South American. There's a like this like it the release schedule is all set so every region can get a little bit of presence in all of the streaming platforms. And I kind of think that's cool. I don't. Most of this stuff I don't like. Not that I don't like. It's not like bad or anything. It's like just I just don't get it. There's like some like lost in translation or a culture gap that I'm just not. I'm not bridging quickly enough to get into the series. And sometimes it's really compelling, and there's only like 4 episodes, and then the series is done.
Like that on pirate sites too. Funny
Yeah,
enough, um, it's. I'm always amazed at how much media is being made in all these different places, but
yeah.
it's like shocking.
Did you know
Like,
that there's an Australian version of The Office now?
yes, I did see that, which I
It took long enough.
English speakers are perhaps the dumbest people on the planet, just in terms of I because you can't really understand the Office British version as an American. Like you can, but a lot of the stuff is lost in the accent. And so
Yeah, British Office to me was super cringe. Like
it was, I mean, but so was the main Office, but it
American
was a different
Office,
type of cringe.
yeah, American Office was this, but well, only because I'd had some minor corporate experience, some very small scale corporate experience. Like there were some things about it that were just like, holy crap, this is like too close to home. Whereas the British Office, I didn't have that kind of experience. It was just the cringe part. But yeah, American
Well,
Office was full cringe. Like every chance they got, they made it cringeworthy.
and that's where I don't under I've never been to Australia, so it may be one of those things where it actually makes sense because they're like 20 years behind on everything all the time. And
Except
people
Jackie
there.
Chan. Except Jackie Chan. They were way ahead of the curve on Jackie Chan. But he also made his movies down there.
Mm.
Man, so my whole understanding of Australia, this sucks. My whole understanding of Australia comes from like Crocodile Dundee movies, Jackie Chan movies, and limited like reality television series that exist in Australia. And then of course like the very like limited scope of what I get about Australian media in terms of some tourist goes into the outback and dies kind of stuff. And so I have this probably unreasonable belief that everything in Australia is going to try and kill you, and if you leave any of the population centers, it's just like waiting to die. I know that I hope that's not the case. I hope I'm being real, just ignorant about it, because also what I've seen is just some really vividly cool looking landscape, and also a giant wasteland in the middle. But apparently there's like an opal mine that you can just go to and start like with a shovel and just pick out like big pieces of opal like straight out of the ground. So for people that are into gems and precious stone type stuff, that might be like a weird destination vacation thing. And if I know about it, I'm sure that group is very well aware that there's a place where you can just go dig up like big ass opals.
Well, you have to be able to go there, and I was thinking about there there are different ways to go about restricting things, and Americans don't have to get their passports taken away if they just get priced out of travel. So it's like this notion of, yeah, there's a place you can just go fucking pick like shovel opals, but what's the goddamn ticket to Australia cost? What's the cost of getting from the airport to the opal mine?
Oh,
What's
like the cheapest flight right now is just under $1,000 one way, and it has a connecting flight somewhere. They all have connecting flights somewhere. You can't just get on a plane from Indianapolis to Sydney and not expect a connecting flight. At least one, probably two. Oh yeah, more reasonable figures in the $1,600 to $2,400 range.
Yeah, that's what, and that's like probably for a really uncomfortable seat for a really long ass flight. So you're talking about $2,400 to not have leg room for fucking 28 goddamn hour flight or whatever
20.
the
Let's
fuck.
see. It's 12:50. 28 hours. 28, 24, 24, 59. If you, that's a two stop.
Oh my
30
god.
hours.
Oh my god.
So you might have to that someone might have to sit there and smell someone's feet for like
Yeah.
2 days.
Those are the flights where your feet start to swell up because you've been in the air for so long.
Yeah.
Shit like that. Like,
Circulation starts to get weird.
yeah, you're like in much danger of deep vein thrombosis,
Yeah.
fucking aneurysm, shit like,
It looks like the
man.
vast majority of them are 30 hours or less, but there are quite a few that are over 30 hours.
Mm, that's brutal.
That's it's the kind of thing.
I'm in pain just thinking about being in a plane for that long.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing where you almost want to like have an open jaw and stay in like Hawaii for a day, just so your feet can like experience proper circulation, or even fly to Korea and stay there for a day and let your blood circulate properly.
On those types of flights though, it does help to buy access to the showers, and that's one of the things that I realized in traveling a lot is taking a shower. It may cost maybe $30 or something, but it's like the best $30 you'll ever fucking spend. Maybe $40 or something.
And you get you get to say that you've taken a shower at 30 or 40,000 feet. That's like a
No, no, no. It's like it's at the air. They
the
have these
airport.
at like the some of the executive lounges will have shower and nap areas, full
Oh
on
yeah,
nap areas, and it's like
like a
you
little
pay.
hostel in the airport.
It's kind of like a hostel, but it's more so like
Yeah, the fancy
the
lounge.
if it's like a dark area where there's a bunch of chair type things that are long enough that you could sleep in, but they're not beds.
Yeah,
So it's like they may have some that have actual beds in them, or there may be higher paying ones where there are beds, but it's like just it's the exact type of thing you need if you got a fucking 6 hour layover and you just got off a flight from one place that was 12 hours and then you're about to get on another flight that's 12 hours, but in 6 hours.
yeah.
It was the best thing ever.
So there's the Virgin Atlantic Clubhouse, Air France La Première Lounge, Qatar Airways Al Moran Business Lounge, and the Emirates First Class Lounge. And these are like known for being some like the most luxurious amenities provided in high class airport lounge experiences. These are the top tier lounges. And just looking at the pictures of these places, like these look like really fancy restaurants or really fancy nightclubs, and some of them actually have bed suites, like the Swiss Senator Lounge.
Yeah, and
Hong
it's
Kong
not
International Airport Lounge looks like the swankiest sushi bar.
it's one of those things where if you're on one of those trips, it's you might as well do it. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if they just don't think about it or if they're just, you know, they don't want to they don't believe that they deserve it or whatever, but it just makes everything so much better.
Yeah, I I'm still like hard pressed to be convinced to get onto an airplane at this point.
Oh yeah, fuck no. I'm not getting on a
Like
plane anytime
I
soon.
don't
No, fuck that.
driving through the drop off terminal or the pickup terminal is that's like that's enough anxiety for me. I don't want to get on a fucking tube with a bunch of people and share their oxygen for 4 to 8 hours plus. Who knows? That's
If it's
just
like
that's
Air
just
France,
that's just terrifying.
Lufthansa, Turkish Airlines, there's like three or four that are trustworthy, but they're none of them are American.
Oh, oh.